Hello, class. Once again, it's Mr. Cablan here. And what we're going to do for this lesson is a little bit technical here. So, again, as we go along, and just make sure you're paying very close attention to the details in each question. And what we're going to do for this one here is we're going to take a look at equations that start off in what is called standard form. And then we're going to move things around so it's going to be in the form that we saw in the previous lesson, which is y equals mx plus b. Okay, so if you take a look at the basic concepts here, what we're going to see here is we're going to start off with an equation, like I said before, which is represented what's called standard form. And a quick way to remember standard form is that everything is to one side, okay, typically the left, okay, and on the other side is just 0. Okay, now you notice that what we have here is ax plus by plus c, and all you have to know about a and b here is the fact that a is always going to be a whole number, and b and c are just integers, okay, which is again whole numbers as well. Okay, and then a and b cannot both be 0; they actually have to have a number. And what we're going to do here is we're going to take that equation, okay, and we're going to rearrange things such that we can have it in the form of y equals mx plus b here. All right. Okay, and the purpose of this is that we're going to discover is that not every linear equation will always be in the form y equals mx plus b. However, okay, you can change it to that form based on what we're going to be seeing in the next set of examples here. All right, so let's get straight to it. So for the first example here, what we want to do here is just to understand that when we're looking at equations, that the equation in standard form and the equation of y equals mx plus b are exactly the same. So it says here the equation 6x minus 2y plus 8 equals 0 is written in standard form. So as you can see, we have the x, the y, and a number all to one side, and then 0 on the other. And in this example here, y represents the total cost of a school field trip, and x represents the total number of students going on the trip. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take the graph and we're just going to break it down in terms of how we did it in the previous lesson here. So what we have here again is a line that's going up the right, and we have 2 points there. So the way we're going to calculate the graph, the slope of the line here, is to use rise over run. And don't forget, since it's a line that's going up to the right, it's going to be a positive slope. So using rise over run, we're just going to connect those 2 points with a right triangle, like so. And we're just going to count. So from the top point here, if you count the number of boxes from the top point to the corner of the triangle, okay, we'll get a rise here of 6. And if we count the number of boxes going across from the bottom left point to the corner of the triangle there, that's going to give us 2. So in this case here, we have a rise of 6 and a run of 2. And if you use your fraction key, 6 fraction key 2, that's going to give me a slope here of 3. All right. So starting off with the slope here, what we have here is a slope of 3. So keep that in mind. So the next thing we're going to do here is understand that for this question here, the slope of the line is just represents the rate of change, which in this case here is going to be the total cost in terms of the number of students, okay, or the price for each student. All right, so the next thing we're going to do here is we're now going to find the y-intercept just by looking at this. So you can see here that if you take a look at this line and take a look at where it touches the y-axis, it touches the y-axis here at 4, okay? So it says, what is the y-intercept? Well, the y-intercept here is 4. And in this case here, this is what's called the base fee, okay, which is going to be the cost if there's no students that go on this trip. Okay, so this is just an understanding of the question. Ultimately, what I want you just to see here again is how we came up with the slope and how we found the y-intercept. Okay, if you need to complete that, okay, you can press pause in the video. Okay, so next part. So it says here, write the equation of the line in the form y equals mx plus b. So starting off by writing off y equals mx plus b here. Now remember that slope is always going to be the letter m here. So that slope of 3 is going to replace the m. And the y-intercept there is going to be 4, which is the b. So the equation of the line that we did in the previous example is going to be y equals 3x plus 4. Okay. So notice that what we've done there is that we took that last line, we found the slope by using rise over run, and we used our eyes to see where the line touched the y-axis. Okay, and the slope again is the letter m, The y-intercept there is the letter B. We just replaced those letters and we came up with the equation. So the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to take the equation in the problem, 6x minus 2y plus 8, and we're going to isolate y. Now, what isolate means is that we're whatever letter we want, which in this case is y, we're going to leave it alone. Okay, so if you take a look at the y, you notice what is also attached to the y is a -2. So we're going to leave that alone there. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to move the things first. Now, what's important in this is the order that we move things. So when we want something in the form of y equals mx plus b, okay, the first thing we're going to do here is we're always going to move the x term first. So if you take a look at what I'm going to do first here, we're going to take the 6x, okay, and we're going to move it to the other side and make it a negative, okay, and it becomes a negative because, again, that 6 there is a positive, so when it goes to the other side, it changes to a negative. So for the next step here, we will get negative 2y plus 8 is equal to negative 6x. So that's the very first step. So the next thing we're going to do here, we're now going to move the number. So we're going to take the positive 8, okay, move it to the other side, and then it becomes negative 8. All right, now the last step is going to be relatively new for you. So what we're going to do here is that for the final step, we're going to isolate the y by dividing every single term there by the number attached to the y, which in this case here is -2. Okay, so when we do that, it cancels out the -2's on the left side. Okay, and remember that anytime you see two negatives on top of each other or beside each other, they're always going to change into a positive. Okay, and all we're going to do here is divide. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. Okay, so the first part will be 3x, and the second part here will be 4. Okay, so for part B here, it says how does the result compare to your answer in 1C? You notice that both are exactly the same. Okay, so that's an introduction to how to change an equation from standard form to y equals mx plus b. And remember, all you need to do is to move the x term first, and then the number. And then if you need to, divide each term there by the number that's attached to the y. That's it. That's pretty much it. All right, let's take a look at more examples here. So for the first one here, let's take a look at the first example. Again, we have -4x plus y plus 7 equals 0. So what we're going to do first, again, we're always going to leave the y alone. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to take the -4x and move it to the other side. Now, since this is a -4x, when it goes to the other side of the equal sign, that then becomes a positive 4x. So what we have there will be y plus 7 is equal to 4x. Now, before we proceed with the next step here, notice the y, okay, doesn't have a number in front. Okay, so we're just going to isolate the y here, and notice there's a plus. Okay, and our last step in this case is we're going to take the 7 and move it to the other side, and then it becomes -7. Okay, and believe it or not, that's the final answer to that. Now, for the next step here, we're just going to identify the m and the b, where the m is a slope and the b is a y-intercept. Okay, and the best way to do that, okay, is to line up the m's and the b's. Okay, so for example, if you take a look at this one here, the m here is the 4, and the b here is the -7. Now, I want you to pay very close attention to the next example here, because you notice that what we have here is 5x minus y minus 9 is equal to 0. Now, you're going to see we're going to follow the exact same steps. Okay, we're going to move the letter first and then the number. Okay, but this one has a slight twist to it. So for part B over here, okay, again, we're going to move the letter first. So we're going to take the 5x. It's going to go to the other side, and it's becoming a negative. Okay, so we have -y minus 9 is equal to -5x there. So the next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to take the -9, move it to the other side, and it becomes a positive. Okay, so what we have here is -y is equal to -5x plus 9. Now, pay very close attention to the last step here. Notice that what we want here is y. Okay, but notice what we have here is -y. So for the final step here, okay, what's really hiding in front of that y is an invisible 1. So what we need to do in our final step here is we need to divide each term here by -1. And what that does It changes the negative 1y into just y because the two negative ones cancel out. Okay, and all we're going to do here is understand again, we have two negatives, so that's going to become a positive. And for the 9 over -1 there, since we have a positive and a negative, that changes to a negative. So what we wind up here is the final answer will be y equals positive 5x, which we just write as 5x minus 9. So you can see here, the m here is the 5, and the 9 here, the -9 here will be the y-intercept. All right, let's take a look at more examples. So in these next set of examples here, we're just going to throw some examples with where the resulting slopes are fractions. Okay, so for the first one here, we have 2x plus 5y minus 15 equals 0. So again, what we want to do here is to isolate y or leave the y alone. Okay, and again, just like the previous examples, the very first thing that you need to move here is the term with the letter x. So for the first step here, we're going to take the 2x. Okay, we're going to move it to the other side. And since this is a positive 2x, this becomes a negative 2x here. Okay, next one over here, we're going to take the negative 15. Okay, and since this is a negative, when it goes to the other side, it becomes a positive. So this now becomes 5y is equal to negative 2x plus 15. Now, for the final step, in order to isolate the y, remember our final step, what we want to do here is to divide each term here by the number attached to the y. So in this case here, we're going to divide each term here by 5. Now, remember when it comes to slopes, okay, always leave the slope as a fraction in the lowest term. So when you divide the negative 2 over 5, you're just going to leave it as that, negative 2 over 5. Okay, the reason for that is because if you try that, it will give you a decimal, and we don't want decimals. However, if you take the 15 and you divide it by 5, okay, that's actually going to give us a whole number, which in this case here is 3. So the final answer to this will be y equals negative 2 over 5x plus 3. All right, and just to determine the m and the b, our m here is the negative 2 over 5, and the b here is the 3. So those are our m and our b respectively. All right, so see another one here. So we have negative 3x minus 7y plus 14 equals 0. Okay, so again, just like the previous example, you're going to take the negative 3 first. Okay, move it to the other side, and since it's a negative, when it crosses the other side, it becomes a positive. Okay, we're going to take the 14 next, and since it's a positive, when it goes to the other side, it becomes a negative. All right, so again, same set of steps. Move the term with the x first, okay, and then move the number. Now, for the final step here, we're now going to isolate the y by dividing each term here by negative 7. Okay, and that all that does is cancel out the negative 7s that are attached to the y. Okay, and don't forget, since it's a fraction, that gives us a decimal over here. Keep it as a fraction in lowest terms. So 3 over negative 7, that's going to give us negative 3 over 7 there. Now, for this one here, we have negative 14 over negative 7. Two negatives become positive. And the good thing about 14 and 7 is that when you divide them to each other, it gives us a whole number of 2. So the final answer of this will be y equals negative 3 over 7x plus 2. Okay, so line them up here for the m and the b. So again, our slope m here is negative 3 over 7, and our y-intercept here, which is the b, which is 2. All right. So again, that's just taking a look at how to represent equations in the form of y equals mx plus b, such that if you have a slope that's a fraction, you can see that you just leave it as a fraction there. All right, so for the next set of examples, it's exactly the same thing. The only difference is that we're going to turn into a word problem here. So it says, in this case here, tickets for a local theater production are $20 per adult and $10 per child. Okay, given by the equation 20x plus 10y equals r, and r represents the revenue. Okay, so x represents the number of adult tickets sold, and y represents the number of children's tickets sold. So it says here the theater company wants to bring in revenue 7,500 for each of these two shows. The number of adult tickets sold for these shows is 200 and 350 respectively. So it says to write the revenue equation in slope y-intercept form. All right, so starting off by let's start off by writing the equation that's given to us in the question. Now we have one slight gap to fill in for this question. You notice what we have here is 20x plus 10y is equal to r. So in this question, it tells us that there's a revenue of 7,500 here. So the first things first, we're going to replace the 7,500 for the r to give us the revenue. Now, slight twist to this one. You notice that in this question, we only have the x and the y on one side, and we already have a number on the right side there. So for this question here, what we want to do here to put it in the form of the slope y-intercept form, all we're going to do for this case here is we're going to move the term of the x to the other side. And also something that's slightly different with this one is that when we move the x to the other side here, we're just going to squeeze it in front of the 7,500 is already there. Okay, and you're probably asking, you know, why do we have to do it that way? Because remember, slope y-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Okay, so when you have y equals mx plus b there, okay, the term with the x is always in front of the number, the whole number that's already there. All right, and for the final step, we're just going to take the 10 here and divide each term by that 10. Okay, so negative 20x divided by 10, that's going to give me negative 2x, and then 7,500 divided by 10 will give me 750. Okay, nice whole numbers when we divide. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're now going to use that equation, and we're just going to replace and solve for how many children tickets are sold, because remember that y represents the number of children's tickets. So all we're going to do here is that since x represents the number of adult tickets, we're just going to replace the 200 and then substitute it in for the x. Okay, so don't forget when you substitute a number in for a variable or letter, just put brackets around it, get the calculator to do the work. So when you go negative 2 and in brackets 200 plus 750, that's going to give us 350. So when 200 adult tickets are sold, 350 children's tickets were sold. So same thing for the next one. So we have y equals negative 2x plus 750. So we're replacing the 350 in for the x. And that's going to give us 50. So when 350 adult tickets are sold, 50 children's tickets will be sold. All right. So for that one there, you're probably asking, you know, why did we have to rearrange the equation first? Okay, only reason for that is because by rearranging the equation, all we had to do was to substitute the value in for the variable, and we were able to do the final answer there and do it in one step. All right, so for the last example we're going to see here, we're going to look at just other ways to solve for the standard form when there's missing pieces of information. So it says here, the line 6x plus 8y plus c equals 0 passes through the point 3, negative 4. And what we want to do here is to determine the value of c. Now, I want you to pay very close attention to this example here, because this is a very technical example. So first things first here, always start off by writing down the equation. So 6x plus 8y plus c equals 0. So remember that what we want to do here is solve for the letter c. And you probably want to know, how in the world do we do that? Notice in this question, we are given a point. So anytime you're given a point, okay, a point is always going to give us the two numbers here, where the two numbers represent the x and the y respectively. So this 3 here, that's going to be the value for x, which we're going to replace in the equation with a bracket. Okay, notice I'm highlighting using boxes and colors here to show you where these letters, numbers are going to go in for the letters. Okay, so the negative 4, that's going to replace the y. Okay, that's pretty much it. So anytime you're given a point, okay, don't forget that the point is always going to be x and y. Now, in the next step here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the x there with the 3 and the y there with the negative 4. And for each of those numbers, I'm going to put them in brackets respectively, like that. So all I've done there is I replace the x there with a 3 in brackets, and then all I've done there is replace the negative 4 in for the y and put that in brackets as well. Now I am going to break this one step by step here. So all I'm going to do there is simplify what's inside the brackets. So for example, 6 times 3, or 6 brackets 3, that gives me 18. And then 8 times -4, that gives me -32. Okay, and as you can see here, I'm just going to clean things up on the left side by going 18 minus 32, which gives me -14. Now remember that what we want to do here is to isolate the C. Okay, and the way we do that, because notice that what we have here is a number and a letter separated by a plus sign in this case. So all I'm going to do in the final step is to take the -14, okay, move it to the other side, and it becomes 14. Okay, that's pretty much it. So again, anytime you're given an equation in standard form and you're asked to solve for a letter, okay, in this case here it's asking you to solve for C. Just remember that the point is always going to substitute the X and the Y there. So you're always going to be given the point X and Y, okay, just know exactly where they need to go there. All right, so that wraps up this lesson here. So you can continue working on the workbook, or if you have the textbook in front of you, you can work on that as well. And I'll see you in the next lesson.